We say dinosaurs were created on days 5 and 6 of creation 6,000 years ago. They walked the earth with human beings. They went on Noah's Ark about 4,500 years ago.
So you think there was a global flood in the 25th century BCE during the Mesopotamian wars of the early dynastic period, when schools taught scribes how to read and write in cuneiform? How did those courses continue, as we know they did for another 1,000 years after that? There was a global flood during the building of the necropolis on Malta. How were the Maltese still there to complete it? Is this global flood the reason that the Irish abandoned Skara Brae? How then are there still Irish people there today? How were there already enough British people to build Stonehenge immediately after this flood? How did the 5th dynasty of Egypt have enough people already to build the Khafra pyramid within a generation of this flood? How could there even be a 5th dynasty when the previous generation had all died in the flood? How could there have been a similar change in the early dynastic periods of Sumer? How did this flood affect the establishment of Assyria? How did the Italian library of Ebla survive this global inundation? And how were there still Italians there to keep it going for another couple centuries after that? And what about the fishermen in Peru and other tradesmen in South America? Or the history teacher in Somerset, UK, who was genetically matched to his ancestor who lived in the same area 10,000 years earlier? Considering that the remains of human DNA for indigenous people in different parts of the world matches the people who are still living in those places today, that's obviously proof that there was never a global flood at that time, nor was there any time when there could have been a global flood. Wouldn't it be nice if people cared about what was really true and stopped pretending things that we know are not? Mr. Dutko, when you say there was a global flood 4,500 years ago, I don't think you're silly. I think you're dishonest, delusional, and not connected with reality at all. You're certainly not telling the truth, especially when you pretend as if there were dinosaurs there too.
Most dinosaurs aren't that big. There's only a handful of them that grew to big sizes, and I think God would be smart enough to send those as babies when he got to Noah's Ark.
If there was a God, then he wouldn't have saddled 8 already overworked people with having to raise hundreds of orphaned dinosaurs. God would have been smart enough that there wouldn't have been a flood in the first place. If your problem was with a handful of primitive people in the Levant, you don't break all the laws of physics all the way around the world to kill every wombat in Australia and every fawn in North America. You could just nuke that one place, or, you could just blink them out of existence, like really powerful characters could. Now, if you have a problem with a few people in one geographic area, blat, they're gone. That's for God or man. If you can take out a small community, that's a big deal. You don't have to kill everything everywhere. But that's only if you're a stupid God. If you're a smart God, and you have any love for your creations at all, then you wouldn't kill them, especially not when it's actually your responsibility, not that of the creations. If you're a real God, you would be smart enough to go down to creation personally, as the Bible says God had done plenty of times already, except do something different than what God usually do, which is just make narcissistic demands. Why not try to reason with the people like a wise father would? If you're a father God, then make it a teaching moment. That's what a father would do. That's what a father God would do. That's what a real God would do if there was such a thing.
Okay, and then that's it. And then they gradually, slowly went extinct over the last 4,000 years or so, with the last few remnants of dinosaurs not completely going extinct until just a few hundred years ago.
Actually, dinosaurs are not entirely extinct. We still have birds. And birds are a subset of dinosaurs, just as chickens are a subset of birds. I did a 10-part presentation with a paleontologist going over all the particulars to prove that birds are definitely dinosaurs, according to every one of the diagnostic criteria to define that class. I'll put a link to that discussion below. The case is closed. There's no dispute on that anymore. You can still distinguish birds among dinosaurs, but you can no longer distinguish birds from dinosaurs. And all the other dinosaurs, except for birds, went extinct a really long time ago, and no human has ever seen one alive.
And by the way, this is documented in public records. Like, for example, do you know that all over the world, there's cave drawings that you can go see that are tourist attractions, cave drawings from 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago of people drawing dinosaurs on the caves.
That'd be amazing, wouldn't it? I mean, look at these talented renderings from the Lascaux cave in France. Here we have what is unmistakably a pride of lions. You can tell just by the shapes in their faces. The artist paid attention to subtle detail. And that makes me wonder about these animals. Are they elephants? Their shape doesn't look quite right. Their heads jut out a bit, and it looks like their ears are tiny. I wonder if these might be mastodons. At the same time, we have wild horses alongside a rhinoceros. Look at the extreme horn on that rhino. What are all these African and Asian animals doing in France? Europe has certainly changed a lot in the last 21,000 years. If it wasn't for this artwork, would we have ever known that European zebras were spotted rather than striped? Here is the majestic aurochs, the common ancestor of all domestic cattle breeds. Now, these didn't go extinct until the 17th century. And this is apparently a leopard. Admittedly, this rendering isn't all that good. There are a number of other cats that have spots, and certainly, 21,000 years ago, there were probably other varieties that were still around that likely would have had spots. And we can't tell if it's one of those or not, but we can at least tell by the body shape that it's not a cheetah. Here in another French cave, we have art from 13,000 years ago depicting a woolly mammoth communing with a herd of ibex. In fact, there are at least a few dozen mammoths depicted in this cave, and several repeated lions and horses and other things in both caves. So isn't it strange that there were no dinosaurs to be found in either cave? Well, while there were apparently no dinosaurs in France back then, creationist websites assure us that there were dinosaurs out there somewhere. But now that we've seen how good these cave artists can be drawing ordinary animals, how well do you think that they would depict something really impressive, like a dinosaur? Well, I found an expert to show us.
Hi there, I'm Philip Center. I'm a professor of zoology at Fayetteville State University, and I have been studying for some time the creation-evolution debate and the so-called evidence that the creationists have presented in favor of their position. Some of this includes the idea that the ancients depicted dinosaurs on rock walls. To support the claims of the coexistence of humans with dinosaurs and pterosaurs, young Earth creationist authors have identified several pieces of ancient rock art as depictions of dinosaurs and pterosaurs. Here, 9 such claims are investigated. An alleged pterosaur painting in Black Dragon Canyon, Utah is actually not a single painting. Its so-called head and neck are a painting of a person with outstretched arms. Its torso and limbs are those of a painting of a second person with outstretched arms, whose body continues into the pterosaur's so-called wing. The other so-called wing is a painting of a horned serpent. The 3 paintings only appear connected because someone outlined the group with chalk. An alleged dinosaur petroglyph in Havasupai Canyon, Arizona, is a stylized bird with an extension on 1 foot. The hooked line that represents the head and neck is a stylized bird head. A second alleged dinosaur petroglyph in Havasupai Canyon is a stylized bighorn sheep or rabbit. An alleged dinosaur cave painting in Tanzania is an obvious giraffe. 3 alleged cave paintings of long-necked dinosaurs in Zambia have short necks and most likely represent lizards. An alleged dinosaur painting on Agawa Rock in Lake Superior, Provincial Park, Ottawa, represents underwater panther, a supernatural lake guardian of Ojibwe tradition. An alleged pterosaur painting at Alton, Illinois, is the product of the imagination of a 19th century American author. These pieces of rock art now join the ever-growing pile of discredited evidence for the ancient coexistence of humans and dinosaurs.
Creationists like to say that this is an Edmontosaurus, even though Edmontosaurus walked like this. Its vertebrae is such that the tail couldn't bend that way. It can't hold that position. This cave picture looks more like it has a long tail because of an apparent error in the artwork. It's more likely a bird, maybe an eagle, which is technically a dinosaur, so I'll give you that one. Here's a fun one, though. You really got to use your imagination to see this and pretend as if it's supposed to be a dinosaur, a sauropod. This image is so bad, it doesn't even look intentional, and I don't think that it is. Which reminds me, let me show you a clip from my speech on Flintstone's archaeology to show you my favorite dinosaur cave painting. What if you saw something that was really impressive, like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, especially if it's locked in mortal combat with a woolly mammoth? What would an artist capable of this do given such a dramatic scene as a T-Rex versus a mammoth? Prepare yourself. There it is. Are you stunned? You need a little help with the fade? There's the highlight. We have a battle of hand puppets with Barney on one side and Dumbo on the other. Stay focused, because I'm stay focused on this, because I'm going to take the highlight away. Look at that. I know you're wowed. Okay, and this is what creationists present as proof that all the expert specialists in the world are wrong and that only undereducated evangelists have it right. Here is the proof that Fred Flintstone really lived with Dino. And how could you argue with that?
If you go over to Cambodia, there's a tourist attraction, there's a jungle temple from the Khmer civilization 1,100 years ago, and they have carved into the stone pillars a bunch of different animals from 1,100 years ago. One of them carved in there is a stegosaurus. How'd they know what a stegosaurus looked like? I mean, remember that the science of paleontology and creating dinosaur skeletons, that didn't start developing until the 1800s. So, and to excavate these bones from rock is a slow, meticulous process. It didn't begin until the 1800s. First dinosaur skeleton wasn't constructed until then. So if evolution is true, those dinosaur bones have been buried, embedded in rock for 66 million years, invisible to the naked eye. Nobody walks along and sees a stegosaurus skeleton laid out. How'd they know what they look like?
They didn't. Here's that column of local wildlife. Notice how all of them are surrounded by decorative foliage, flowering vines and such. And here's the one that Duco is calling a stegosaurus, because he's looking at the leaves or flower petals behind it, not the animal itself. So what happens when we remove those petals? Do we get anything looking remotely like a dinosaur at all? The first thing I notice is that stegosaurs have this tiny little bird's head with a beak, but this thing has a large head with no beak. Instead, it has a blunt, broad snout. And then I notice the external ears. That's a mammal thing. Only mammals have external ears. And you can call these horns if you want to, but they're not curved and they're pointing the wrong way, and stegosaurs didn't have horns anyway. The next thing I notice is the hooves. Stegosaurs didn't have hooves either. And what they did have was a massive tail tipped with their trademark weapon, the thagomizer. But this thing doesn't have a powerful dinosaur's tail. Its tail doesn't even reach the ground. It's as wispy as that of any other hoofed mammal, which is what it obviously is. It could be a young Sumatran rhino, but I think it's much more likely to be a wild pig. Here's what a Cambodian wild pig looks like. That is the animal in this image, definitely not a stegosaurus. And Duco already knows this because I explained it to him directly on his radio show over a dozen years ago.
Let's talk about it. The evidence is overwhelming that the evolutionists have it wrong in so many areas, and one of them that's glaring is the issues of dinosaurs. I can make it absolutely clear the evidence is overwhelming that dinosaurs lived with human beings within just the last few thousand years. How would you explain that?
With the video series, there's a two-part video that I did on the 14th Foundational Falsehood of Creationism, wherein I explored the various claims that were made by the falsified Peruvian Ica stones and by the sculpture of a pig that was misrepresented to be a stegosaurus, and a number of other falsified things like that.
You made a claim, okay, that what you debunk are the Inca stones and and a pig's head that was treated as
not a pig's head,
a
pig.
A pig that was treated as a what was it, a pterodactyl or something? What was it again?
Stegosaurus.
Stegosaurus. Okay. Oh, you're talking about the Cambodian jungle temple, aren't you? Okay. Which, by the way, you can call that a pig all you want to. You're kind of kidding yourself, because pigs don't have those stegosaurus plates up and over the back.
Except that those plates are part of the background imagery, and stegosaurs didn't have external ears.
It's nothing more.
Stegosaurs didn't have hooves.
Okay.
They didn't have ears.
It's
and
nothing
they didn't have
more.
Diminished
You know something?
tail.
Anyone, you can claim.
Stegosaurs have great big tails
Mr.
with
Rob.
spikes on the end.
It's a pig! Well done, Viv. You certainly got him there.
As a matter of fact, there's been documented, not just cave drawings, but artwork, mosaics, paintings, carvings, statues, all discovered archaeologically.
Ooh, how exciting. Let's have a look at these, shall we? Creationists say that this is a protoceratops. I say it's another pig. The ancients sure like their pigs. I have to wonder why creationists can't tell a pig apart from a dinosaur. Here's yet another pig, but with a second head growing out of its tail. Is that what makes it a dinosaur, having two heads? Creationists can't tell dinosaurs apart from lizards either. Here's a stylized dragon or lizard, again, with a second head growing out of its tail. And this shows you that it's not even supposed to be real animals. If it was a real animal, that would be a lizard, not a dinosaur. But creationists think that dinosaurs are lizards. Ooh, here's a good one. It's a lion with reptilian scales. The front paws and the tail are obviously those of a cat. The hind legs are those of a perching bird. And the head is that of a lizard or a snake, since dinosaurs didn't have forked tongues. And back then, storytellers often put parts of different animals together to create something new. Or they would depict existing animals with unrealistic features, like this lion with an absurdly long neck. Yet creationists say that this is a dinosaur too. And here's another lion, well, a sea lion. See, ancient people weren't really good artists all the time. Look at how they depicted whales. This is supposed to be a baleen whale being attacked by a killer whale. We know that only because both of them are labeled. Otherwise, creationists would call these dinosaurs too, especially since some translations of the Bible refer to whales as sea monsters. And more recently, we have Peter Bruegel's Suicide of Saul, painted in 1562. If we zoom all the way in, we will see what some creationists have declared to be sauropod dinosaurs. But they're actually camels. Now, these actually are dinosaurs. Well, two of them are. The other's a pterosaur. Not that it matters, because they and some other claimed dino sculptures, too, were proven to be forgeries, fraudulently created and based on plastic toys from around 1960. Some creationists are perfectly happy to accept known frauds as evidence, as we'll see in a moment. Because remember, it's not about understanding reality. These religious extremists are not truth seekers. They don't care what the truth is. That's why they're called believers, because they're trying to make believe something else, even when they already know that what they believe is not the truth.
One thing that could be said here as far as dinosaurs surviving off the ark, because usually when a creationist says something like that, it's followed up with, and these are the dragons in the legends of old. The problem with that is the word dragon comes from a Greek word, drakon, which means snake, which then led to the Roman word draco, which means snake. And if you look at the drakontes and drakones in Greek and Roman myth and see how they are depicted in Greek and Roman art, they are snakes every time. And these snake stories continued into the Middle Ages and evolved. It was not until we get to the 8th century that we see artists adding legs and wings to them.
And fire.
Yes, etc. And it's not until centuries later that any of them become quadrupedal in art and then start to resemble the dinosaurs that were soon to be discovered in the ground, quite by accident. Now, if dragon legends were based on dinosaurs, you would expect the earliest dragon art to look, or the earliest dragons in art to look like dinosaurs. And then maybe as dinosaurs start to go extinct and become less familiar, then the illustrations get less and less like dinosaurs. Instead, we see the exact opposite in art history, which suggests that dragons are not based on dinosaurs at all.
That dragons are based on lizards?
Based on snakes.
Okay. I did a presentation at DragonCon once upon a time, where I showed some depictions, some really the oldest depictions I could find of St. George slaying the dragon. And being aware that he was in North Africa at the time, it struck me that it was so obvious in the illustrations. I've had monitor lizards. I've had Nile monitors living in my house. That's what that is. That's a Varanus. It even has the forked tongue in a lot of the earliest depictions. So the long neck is very clearly, when you look at the earliest depictions, that is a Varanid. But when you get into the copies of copies when medieval European artists are depicting this, apparently they misread what the forked tongue thing was, because instead of having 2 flukes, it has 6 and 8 and 10, and then it begins to look like flames. I'm like, is that where we got a fire-breathing dragon from? And then suddenly, as you said, it's got wings.
Yeah, there's more to that story too, which is actually pretty short. When the Christian writers began writing these saints biographies in the early centuries of the Christian era, they very often took elements from Greek and Roman stories and then added a little twist. And in the Greek and Roman stories, dragons breathe venom, and venom burns when it's in your system, as I can attest from personal experience. And by the end of the 4th century, venom spitting had become fire spitting in the Christian stories, and it was so in the writings before it hit the art. It took a few centuries for this to become flame in art, but the dragons were spitting flame instead of venom very early in Christian history.
Despite how bad all of these examples are, Dutko is really proud of each one. Listen to what he told me about them on his radio show.
I disagree with you that is an image of a pig. I would argue that is clearly a stegosaurus, but I don't even need to use. I don't, Mr. Ra, please. I don't even need to. It has
external ears.
Mr. Ra.
Stegosaurs don't have external ears.
Mr. Ra, I do not need to use the Cambodian jungle temple and from the Khmer civilization. I don't even need to use that. I don't need to use the Ica stones either. There's a whole host that I can use that you can take something like that and go, oh, whoever carved that stone in there made the ears look wrong or made the head too big or whatever. But now you're pinning it on the artist's accuracy as opposed to a clear imagery of a stegosaurus. But I could take both of those. I could take both of those examples. I could take both those examples and throw them away. And the Ica stones I don't use, but the Cambodian jungle temple, I think you're kidding yourself. But even if I gave you that and threw it away, there's too many. Mr. Ra, please. There's too many other countless examples of artwork, carvings, drawings, mosaics that are identical, that have the ears just right, okay, that have the head and the neck and the tail and everything else just right.
There isn't one you could produce.
There isn't? Oh, I suggest you look for them. Like, for example,
I suggest you tell me one
okay.
that you will put yourself behind.
How about
you tell me,
how
you
about,
give me
I'll
an example.
tell you
Hold
right
on.
now.
You give me one single example that you will announce on here that can be scientifically verified to be authentic and be a human, a pre-Columbian human representation of a dinosaur, whatever you want.
I can give you over 30 of them right now. I could give you over 30 of them. Let me give you, just one or two. For example, in the Arizona Historical Society, ancient swords were excavated near Tucson, Arizona. They were excavated in 1924. The swords are referred, by the way, on page 331 of the book Lost Cities of North and Central America. You can look it up for yourself. They have various artwork designs carved into them. One sword has an exact brachiosaurus carved into it. If you look at this, you can show it to anybody. It looks exactly like it came out of a Jurassic Park movie. The Arizona Historical Society owns the sword. You can look at that picture of the brachiosaur. There is nothing ambiguous about it at all. You can't say, the ears aren't right. Nothing along those lines. That's one of example of 30 of them that I can give you right now. I would encourage you to look that up.
Oh, I did. And I'm so glad that I did. Never trust a creationist when they tell you what the evidence shows or what some study says, because whenever you look it up for yourself, it never says what they said it would. Dutko referred me to a collection of crude homemade sword replicas made out of lead. That's right, lead. not steel or bronze or iron, but something that would be utterly useless as a sword. In 1924, this collection of sword replicas were secretly dumped into an already excavated hole and covered over with soft dirt, apparently in the hopes that they would be discovered by archaeologists who would be working that site. But it gets funnier than that, because some of these sword-shaped slabs of lead had Latin and Hebrew inscriptions crudely scratched onto them, with some kind of indication that they were supposed to belong to Roman Jewish immigrants from the 7th century. And that's what Dutko believes they are. However, when linguists took to studying these inscriptions, they saw that they didn't make any sense in either language. And it turns out that most of the lines were copied verbatim from 3 textbooks teaching Latin language. And all of these texts had been published by 1908. So these were not pre-Columbian artifacts like Dutko said they were. No, they were all from the 20th century. But it gets even funnier than that. Because remember, Dutko said that one of these cheap-ass fireplace decorations bore an image that he said was an exact depiction of a Brachiosaurus that looked like it came out of a Jurassic Park movie, when really it was a childlike line drawing that looked like Fred Flintstone's Brontosaurus, except that it had a forked tongue, because these swords were made back when people thought that dinosaurs were giant lizards. And best of all, remember that I challenged Bob Dutko to give me one single example that he would stand behind, that he would announce on the air that can be scientifically verified to be an authentic pre-Columbian representation of a dinosaur. So what was the one artifact that Dutko thought he could trust enough to stake his reputation on? A childish and stupid, obvious prank. Well, obvious to everyone but the deluded believers. His best example of what could be proven true had already been exposed as a hoax 100 years ago. That's how out of date and out of touch with reality he is.
That's public information, but censored in the media and censored from the school books.
No, it's not censored anywhere. It's publicly available. Google it. It's just that those who suffer confirmation bias won't learn what they don't want to know. And reality doesn't tell the same lies that believers tell themselves. They're pretenders, literally fooling themselves, trying to make believe what they know or should know, and sometimes do know, is not really real. They see what they want to see, even when it isn't there. And shouldn't we accept reality as it is and make the best of that? Maybe explore legitimate mysteries without making up shit that ain't real and then lying about it? Because that's all creationism is or does. And that's not helping anyone or anything. So it's time to stop.